Starts and sits for Thursday and Friday right now on Fantasy Football Today Express. What's up and welcome. Adam Azer and Heath Cummings here talking about Packers and Vikings on Friday, and of course Chiefs and Ravens on Thursday.
Packers are playing the Eagles.
Who'd I say?
Vikings.
Okay, well, we can look ahead to that game eventually. Packers and Eagles on Friday, and starter sits Sam Darnold. No. So what do you think? What's your week one philosophy when it comes to starts and sits?
You know, and this is, I know, unique, but I just start generally the player that I have projected to score more fantasy points. So I go through and do my, and I don't get too crazy, but there are, and I don't know if this really impacts the Thursday or Friday games too much. There are guys whose week one rankings are way different than what their full season rankings were. Guys like Jerome Ford and Chuba Hubbard at running back moved way up. Some of the rookies that we were drafting based on upside moved way down. But for the most part, I just start based on the projections.
Well, in terms of projections, how much are you using last year's performances? So, for example, the Eagles having one of the worst pass defenses in football last year. They bring in C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They draft 2 defensive backs with their first 2 picks. They change defensive coordinators.
Yeah. Early in the season, basically the only thing I'm using for matchup is implied points from Vegas. Okay. I'm presuming that if they're playing a good defense, their implied point total will be lower. We get a month into the season. That's when this year's results start mattering more than last year's results. And I will start factoring in which teams are good against the run, which teams are good against the pass. But both of these games, Thursday and Friday, have pretty decent sized over-unders, not like Lions Rams, but enough to where I'm not sitting anyone based on the matchup.
And do you feel like these games will have similar point totals? Chiefs, Ravens, and Packers versus Vikings, Eagles?
Yeah. I mean, I really think that they're both kind of mystery boxes because it's week one and we don't know like who's ahead in terms of the offense versus the defense. And Eagles, Packers, certainly weird being down in Brazil and the teams having to deal with the travel there. But like I said, it's a 46-point over-under for Baltimore, Kansas City, 48.5 for the Packers and Eagles. That makes sense to me.
So Baltimore and Kansas City on Thursday. Break this game down.
So you're starting the quarterbacks, obviously. You're starting the running backs, almost certainly. They're both top 20. I think Henry, I've got at 18th. It's possible you have another running back you'd start over him. Rashee Rice is a start for me. The tight ends are a start. Zay Flowers is really interesting, like right at the border of a number 3 wide receiver. And Xavier Worthy is kind of that home run hitter flex that he might hit, he might bust.
So Mahomes, like obviously, yes, we're starting him, but if he wasn't very good last year, you know, right. And
his fantasy production wasn't very good last year.
Yeah, right. I mean, yes. I guess the Chiefs had a decent season, but his fantasy production wasn't very good, and like he was okay against the Ravens, but not really so great in that playoff game. So yeah, well, I just wonder if people are going to be like, oh, here we go again if he doesn't have a good game.
I think it's possible if he has a slow start to the season. I don't think one game will do that.
Yeah, especially without Marquise Brown. All right, so Rashee Rice, would you start him? Let's see. Would you start him over DK Metcalf, who has maybe Patrick Surtain covering him?
Again, this comes back to not really adjusting for opponent too much. The Seahawks have a pretty good implied total. I have Metcalf as a must start, and I think I actually have him above Rice.
All right. And then Zay Flowers. Would you start Zay Flowers or Chris Godwin against Washington?
I would start Godwin.
Zay Flowers or Calvin Ridley against the Bears?
I would start Ridley.
DJ Moore, maybe against Snead.
DJ Moore.
Agree or disagree with this? Adam looks like Heath's child that plays video games in the basement all day.
I live in Florida, so I don't have a basement. And I do have a child that plays video games all day. But I believe he is currently 6 inches taller than Adam and weighs 40 pounds more than him. They don't look very much alike at all.
Yeah, it's a really bad call. I don't even play video games, and I do have a basement. Okay, we'll take a break. Oh, the DSTs in this game, Heath, you say don't even roster the Chiefs. What about the Bills? What about the Ravens?
I'm just going to start the Ravens and hope they luck into a defensive touchdown or something, as opposed to dropping them. They're my 13th ranked defense. I don't like them, but I'm not dropping them, and I'm not carrying two defenses week 1.
Green Bay is at Philadelphia. We'll talk about that after this break on Fantasy Football Today Express. All right, this is Jordan Love versus Jalen Hurts, and Jordan Love in the last 9 games of the season was the number 5 quarterback per game. Jalen Hurts was excuse me, was actually worse than that, but he was on pace for 19 rushing touchdowns. So this is a guy who finished his season with a flourish against an offense that really wasn't so great in the second half of the year. All right, so Hurts, Barkley, Jacobs, easy starts. AJ Brown, easy start. What about Devontae Smith? I have to cough here. Sorry.
Yeah, I view Devontae Smith as kind of a borderline number 2 wide receiver. I would start him over any Packers wide receiver. Watson and Reed both at the kind of borderline number 3s. I think you're likely to get a top 20-ish week from Devontae Smith.
So, yeah, you like Rashee Rice better than Devontae Smith?
I do.
A lot better or kind of similar?
13 versus 23 in the rankings. The difference is not near as big in non and half PPR, but full PPR, I like Rice a lot better.
And I'm just going to say, just to have a little fun and talk about this. My gut, if I were just going just let's have some fun and not do the smart thing, I would start Christian Watson over Devontae Smith. I just have a good feeling about Christian Watson. I don't trust the Eagles secondary. Okay, what are we talking about? 2 rookies in week 1 are going to make a big difference here. No,
I just don't know how much of their problem last year was schematic, and they've got a new defensive. I think they just really had bad coordinator problems last year.
Well, I mean, you could say that, but at the same time, James Bradbury was a big piece of their Super Bowl season, and he's converting to safety, and he's hurt right now, so he's not even a factor anymore. I think that was a big issue. They're kind of old. They got a little old in the secondary. They did bring back CJ Gardner-Johnson. He was a big absence last year, so that helps. But their pass rusher, they've got, I think some of the young guys that they've drafted and that everybody slobbered over have been a little bit disappointing. They've got to take the next step, like Carter and Dean and all these guys, all the Georgia guys, basically. They have to get better. So not all of them, but some of them. Anyway, I'm not just assuming that their secondary is going to be good. I do think it's going to be a pretty high scoring game. So I'm starting Watson as a flex. I would start Smith over him, drafted him well ahead of Watson. It makes sense. But I like Christian Watson this week. I mean, I want to tell people to start him. Do you feel that way?
I think I understand the upside case that you see for Christian Watson. I just also think that with these Packers wide receivers, they are complete unknowns in terms of usage and role on a week-to-week basis. And I'm glad that Watson's made it through the preseason with only 1 injury scare, but there's still the risk at any moment that he could leave a game. And it's closer to Will Fuller than probably any player in the NFL.
All right. Yeah. Look, I mean, I was very high on Watson in the preseason, so obviously you're hearing that. Jaden Reed is below Watson for you because they were basically
just 1 spot.
Okay.
Yeah, those 2 guys are pretty much exactly where I had them in the preseason. I think wide receiver 36 and wide receiver 37. There's a stretch of guys that I view almost entirely similar, that if you told me that they finished top 15 this week, I wouldn't be that surprised. It's Zay Flowers, Malik Neighbors, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed. Those guys, complete boom bust week 1 options, in my opinion.
Yeah, Watson versus Flowers is tough for me. I would go Watson. You?
I would go Flowers.
Okay. And Goddard and Musgrave. Thoughts real quick?
I'm starting Dallas Goedert as a low-end starter. I want to see, kind of like with the wide receivers, Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, what's the snap share like? What's the target share like? I don't want to start a Packers tight end.
That's Heath. I'm Adam. This is FFT Express, and we will talk to you tomorrow. See you, everybody.